We have a very special Joe and Joe weather show tonight as Hurricane Fiona heads for a landfall in Nova Scotia during the early morning hours of Saturday. We have a potential new tropical storm in the central Caribbean, which we will talk about. And we have two other tropical storms. We have Gaston over the Azores and Tropical Storm Hermine, which has formed east of the Cabo Verde Islands and is taking the vacation route up toward the Canary Islands. All that and so much more tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, in southwest Suffolk County on Long Island, serving the entire New York, New Jersey tri-state area with everything you need when it comes to making sure your home looks good, works great, and you are protected just in case we do get some adverse weather in eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England down the road. So you can make sure that your supplies are in place, like a generator or perhaps a sump pump. And of course, if you're thinking of making your yard look great after the drought of the summer, plenty of mulch and topsoil. And when the time comes, lots of salt for the winter. 631-756-1125 is the telephone number, and the website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
yes. So here we are now, waiting for the next and final landfall of Fiona, which is uh, getting closer and closer to Nova Scotia very quickly as it races northward. And it's still a strong Category 3 hurricane with 125-mile-an-hour winds. And I'm sure, Joe, that up in Nova Scotia, they are busy making their final preparations. And I know that you were calling around on your rotary telephone today and, and grabbed your Joe is very high. He's so tech savvy that he was offered to run Microsoft by Bill Gates and he turned them down. Too many buttons to push. But no matter. In all seriousness, this is a formidable storm that's coming into Nova Scotia, and it's going to get rough. And it already is rough, looking at what I saw on the radar. And you spoke to someone today regarding that.
Right. I spoke with Mike Decoste over at CIGO FM, also known as the Hawk 101.5. And the reason why they're called the Hawk is that they are located in the community or town of Port Hawkesbury in Nova Scotia. And unfortunately, Joe, this appears to be Port Hawkesbury ground zero as far as the storm track is concerned for Fiona. This thing looks like it's going to come right rolling right over them in the pre-dawn hours tomorrow morning, Saturday morning. And so I had a chance to, and the reason why we pre-taped this is that I asked about this evening doing it live, and Mike understandably said, I think by 8:30 our time, 8:30 Atlantic Daylight Time, 7:30 Eastern Time, we're just a little ways past that now. He said, I think we're going to be fairly busy, and I would not doubt it as people try to get as best prepared as possible for what could be one of the worst storms ever to hit Nova Scotia and adjacent Newfoundland. And so as soon as maybe you want to put a loop up of the hurricane or something graphic that we could all look at, that's when we'll run this interview here with Mike, and you can hear for yourself what somebody who is in the direct path of the storm is doing and what people around the region are doing as they prepare for a really monstrous, I think, storm interaction tonight.
Well, let's roll it.
All righty, and I think you should shrink yourself down. So yeah, there you go. All right, so the first line question which I asked Mike was, what exactly is happening? What are you doing in preparation for this major storm that's tracking your way for tonight and into early tomorrow? And this is what he had to say.
So as of right now, when I'm speaking to you, of course, it is kind of the calm before the storm. We have some rain coming down, but there is supposed to be some big estimated rainfall, of course, in the area. We're expecting around anywhere from 100 to 200 plus millimeters of rain coming down at this point, and we are also expecting winds to be gusting over 150 kilometers an hour over exposed areas right now, 120 on the other areas, but still those will be major winds landing in the area in the next little bit. We haven't seen something like this since Hurricane Juan back almost, well, it'll be 19 years ago. So that's how severe the storm is looking on our area right now.
And so I'm sure that a lot of your listeners are expecting that they're going to be losing power in the wake of the storm. Going back to what you just said with Hurricane Juan, it must have been a storm that adversely affected your area for not just a day or two, but for many, many days.
Yeah, power was off for well over a week for some areas. I don't know if it was necessarily our areas, but yeah, back then it was off for well over a week. We even had Hurricane Dorian much recently, like in 2019, where that knocked our power off for over 5 days. So we are expecting to be, everybody's assumed that we are bracing without power for minimum 3 days, if not longer.
Well, it seems like it's a very tough storm. We've been here at Joe and Joe Weather Show. We've been tracking this now for a good number of days. I know a lot of people have been talking about Puerto Rico and the effects of the storm on Bermuda, but we've been saying, at least I've been saying, that I feel more of a problem for the folks who live up your way in Nova Scotia and even portions of Newfoundland, because you're going to be getting hit almost dead on with it. And the fast forward speed of the storm really is going to make for a very rough go.
Yeah, well, especially where the eye of the storm is going to cross right up Route 19, which is a big area here in Cape Breton. So we are in the direct path of it crossing right through. So yes, our listeners are very concerned, but of course we are trying our best to keep them updated with everything we possibly can. And I mean, you guys are doing a great job keeping the world updated with what you guys can provide.
Well, that's what we are here for, and unfortunately, you are the center of attention on our show for tonight. In fact, we don't normally do a Friday night show. We usually take that night off, but we're here, we're watching, and we're praying, actually, for all of you. We're hoping that you'll be weathering the storm, and I know that you're keeping all of your listeners at 101.5 CIGO, the Hawk, the latest information about Fiona. So I thank you very, very much. I know you're very busy over there, but thank you for taking a few minutes of your time out of your schedule to let us know how things are going.
Yeah, no problem, Joe. Thanks for calling.
Okay, so there you go. That's, again, Mike Decoste over at the Hawk, CIGO FM, Fort Hawkesbury, at Cape Breton Island in Nova Scotia. And they're battening down. And Joe, as he said, if this is anything like some of the past storms like Dorian or especially Juan, they could be out of power. They're thinking that they might be out of power for more than just a day or two. This might be something where many folks might have no power for 5, 6, 7 days because of the potency of this big storm approaching, again, the Atlantic Canada region.
And this is actually the strongest North Atlantic hurricane since Hurricane Debbie in 1982, in terms of how strong it is and in the position that it is. We were running the satellite loop, and we put up the Hurricane Center's forecast while you were playing that. And the 5 p.m. advisory is at 39.6, 61.0, with top winds of 125 miles an hour, now moving northeast at 40 miles an hour.
Oh, God, that's going to be terrible.
And in terms of the position of this with respect to Nova Scotia, I just want to get it off the advisory, so I have the number there. I didn't want to just guess it. off the top of my head using the longitude and the latitude. But at 5 o'clock, it was from Nova Scotia 370 miles. So if it's moving 40 miles an hour, it's moved another 120, which puts it down now to about 250 miles southeast of Halifax, Nova Scotia.
It's nice to see that we have somebody on the chat board who is actually right in the path of the storm, Adam Porter. And he says, hi, here in Cape Breton, winds are picking up, but the beer is still cold. So at least he has a sense of humor as this major system heads in his direction.
Well, as long as the beer's still cold and you still have plenty of chips, you're okay. I'm going to bring up the satellite loop again. Excuse me, and we're going to take a look at this floater of Fiona, because there are a couple of things that are going on that are worth noting, and part of the process.
Ross Niederman also on the chat board says down to a Cat 3. Ross, that may very well be the case. It may very well be down to a Cat 3 categorically, but as Joe just mentioned, this thing is flying along at 40 miles per hour. You add on that forward speed to the storm's central pressure and the storm's circulation of winds near the center of the storm. That's only going to, it's not going to act like a Category 3. This could be, more like a Cat 4. I dare say that forward speed, that forward motion, the momentum, the sheer momentum of this system is really going to be something that is going to play a big role when that storm comes ashore. And it looks like, Joe, the storm is going to be coming ashore, Nova Scotia, Cape Breton area, probably sometime after 7 or 8 hours Greenwich time, which would be for them something like 5 or 6 a.m. Tomorrow morning. It's going to be a very rude awakening to their 24th day of September, Saturday, in Nova Scotia. And then later in the day for Newfoundland too.
Yeah, I'm looking on the loop, Joe, and it looks like it's up now almost to 42 north. I mean, this thing is just moving, it's moving along. I wouldn't be surprised if they pick it up eventually. The speed as it makes landfall will be something over 50 miles an hour. It is beginning to start that transition process into a post-tropical cyclone. But I want to be clear that that doesn't anyway mean that all of a sudden, the hurricane's not there. Oh, it's a post-tropical cyclone. That it's a technical designation over whether a system is a warm core cyclone or a cold core cyclone. And as they reach these latitudes, they become more cold core. So what it ultimately means is, notice the distinct comma shape that is on the eastern part of this. If you look at the center of the picture, you could clearly see what's still warm core, and then on the infrared part of this, if you look on the west side, you're seeing what looks like drier air that's getting involved, and drier, colder air is gradually working into this. To turn this into a pure cold core cyclone. The wind field, though, remains very much what you would see in a tropical cyclone. Eventually, what's going to happen is you're going to wind up seeing the strongest winds drop down, but the area of gales and the area of gales and storm force winds will be much larger, and it will cover a lot more geography. And Joe, with the momentum going northward, we're talking sustained winds, but you add the momentum of the storm. If those that are east of the center could certainly see wind gusts up at 90 plus miles an hour, maybe even 100 plus miles an hour as it comes in. And I zoomed in so you could see Nova Scotia pretty well as it slides southwestward as the storm moves northeastward.
Well, 150 kilometers per hour, which is what our friend in Port Hawkesbury had mentioned, Mike Decoste. He said 150 kilometers per hour. That would translate, if you do the conversion, to 93 miles per hour. So You're right, 90, maybe even 100 miles an hour. If not, you know, steady winds, at least in strong gusts. Certainly a damaging wind that will be probably doing a lot of damage in terms of taking down a lot of trees and also, unfortunately, taking down a lot of power lines as well.
And there's also quite a bit of rain going on the west side already. I was trying to find a decent looking radar that we could look at, and unfortunately, the Weather Service up in Canada followed the lead of the Weather Service here with the way the radar looks, and it just you can't really make out the geography. I might as well just throw green and yellow paint on the screen, but it's been raining pretty much all day in Nova Scotia. They had that front come through yesterday, and now, of course, that frontal boundary is just is pretty well getting playing second fiddle here as the storm rides along it to the east. I'm noticing. I'm thinking what's happening, Joe. If I'm just looking at this floater, I could always use a few more frames in the future to kind of uh, confirm this, but from my eyeball here, it looks like it might be moving more northerly now. And this would be expected because as it interacts with that very deep upper trough, it'll probably start to turn, a little more west of north and get into eastern Nova Scotia. If it were to move straight north from here, it would clip the extreme eastern part of Nova Scotia, but it's going to probably start taking a slight jog west of due north, which is going to put it in a bit further west on the on Nova Scotia.
Yeah, and we said that yesterday and the day before that, again, this is a rule that goes back to a forecaster from almost 50 years ago, Rosenblum's rule, where when a storm system is interacting with an upper level system and is suddenly strengthening or there's a spike in its activity, it tends to turn more to the left or to the northeast. And it's exactly what this storm apparently is about ready to do. So, and the thing that really is scary to me is the forward speed. We're looking at a storm that is every bit similar to the great Long Island hurricane of 1938. The reason why that storm was so devastating, especially across central and eastern Long Island, and actually was so strong it actually formed Shinnecock Inlet. The reason why that storm was so potent was because of the forward speed. It was moving so rapidly, and the same holds true for this storm. So we'll have to see and wait and what happens. But again, that's what makes this a really scary proposition. The storm already is a very formidable system, but now add on those strong forward motion moving winds, and you have a storm that could spell a lot of problems.
So I have the hazards map up, and we could see some of the weather that's going on here at the moment. And along the coast, I'm noticing winds gusting past gale force, just the beginnings of it. And by the way, you can also see the wind barbs. They're all north or northwest around Halifax. So you know by that that the storm is going to be going into the east of them. So the buoy right near the coastline there is reporting northwest winds at 38 miles an hour or 33 knots. We'll go a little further. There's a Bevan Island. Um, that is wind of 37 miles an hour, gusting to 43. And then we go up to the eastern part. Now, here's where you see the winds. All the reporting stations here are reporting winds northeast. Okay, so what we're going to look for, if this is going to make landfall, say somewhere in eastern Nova Scotia, let's say I'm trying to get. I can't pronounce this. It's I can't pronounce that name. So let me see what the nearest city is here. No, that's a buoy. Um, Evanston. Okay, so if it's going to cut through from Evanston and go from the Atlantic side to say St. George's Bay on the other side. And by the way, there's a wind gust there of 56 already at what's it called? Antigonish. Antigonish.
Antigonish. Yes.
56 mile an hour wind gusts there. So if the storm is going to take a track just to the left of this area, you're going to see all these winds start to turn more easterly and then go southeast and even south. So this will be one of the tip-offs as to what's going on. East Point, I guess that's on the New Brunswick side there, just touching the water, is at reporting a northerly wind at 36, gusting to 44. And it's, by the way, and it's early in the game if the center is still 250 miles out, and they're already getting gales up here. And I'm also going to widen out a little bit because you're going to lose the geography here, but you kind of see where Nova Scotia is. I'm going to layer the radar on top of it, and that should give you an idea, at least right now. It's raining fairly heavily when you go toward Halifax and points west on the radar. Not quite to the Maine border, okay? It cuts off close to the Maine border, but not quite. Most of what you see, the darker blue, is either very, very light rain or not even reaching the ground. We'll just check on that. Yeah, this one area is not Point Lepreau or Lepreau, not reporting any rain there. So you kind of have to get into the green area on the radar echoes there to find where there's some steadier rain. And of course, in the yellow echoes, we're probably seeing some heavier rain, and it gets a little more showery as you go to the east. So it's pretty much a wait and see now with respect to where this is, where this is all headed in the next 6 to 8 hours. See, if it's moving 40 miles an hour, Joe, it's going to be there in 6 hours. Landfall is going to be in 6 hours. It'll be at about 2 a.m.
Yeah, if that be the case, then it's going to be earlier than the time frame I just mentioned a few moments ago of something like 4, 5, 6 a.m. Atlantic Daylight Time. But whether it comes at 2 or 4 or 6 or whatever, it's still going to be a hard hitter when it finally does make landfall. And it's again, the rule of thumb for tropical cyclones is the heavy rains fall to the west of the path, and the heaviest or most extreme winds fall to the east of the path. Somebody on the chat board mentioned about Hurricane Gloria, Max Bringle, that people tend to forget Hurricane Gloria from 1985. Forward speed to that one reached 50 miles per hour. Yes, and much of central and eastern Long Island really got hit very, very hard. Many places had no power for over a week. Meanwhile, west of the storm track with Gloria hit more or less in central Long Island. And west of the storm track, they got a goodly amount of rain, but the winds were not really anywhere near as extreme. And I remember, Joe, Mayor Koch at that time, Ed Koch was the mayor of New York, and he was walking through the streets of New York right after the storm passed and said, "We scared the hurricane. We scared the heck out of the hurricane," expecting, of course, that there would be, everything would be falling over because of the strong winds. But again, New York up to about central Long Island just received a lot of heavy rain and some wind gusts, strong wind gusts. It was really the places east of the storm track across Long Island that really got hammered. And again, this is exactly what we're looking at right now with this particular hurricane. Places to the east probably are going to get the worst of the winds. Places to the west already seeing some very heavy rainfall as a result of the approach of that storm.
Waiting for the 8 o'clock advisory here. So the last one, while we're waiting, because it should be out any moment, I'm going to see if there's a new recon in this. And, well, they have a recon on the way. So that means that oh, wait. Sometimes with the graphic is not quite okay. So here's the recon. The recon on the graph here. So at roughly at about just before 7 o'clock Eastern time, they measured a wind up close to 110 knots, and the pressure now is falling. Now you notice the pressure is up at 975 when it hit that 110, so it wasn't even at the center yet. And now that as you look at toward the left side of the graph, the pressure is down somewhere under 940. Now they'll do a correction, whatever correction they do to come up with whatever number they come up with. And notice the winds drop off there, so they're in the center right now. And let me give this a refresh again to see if the 8 o'clock advisory is in, and it is not. So we're going to get some new information from the Hurricane Center shortly. So why don't we'll come back to this in just a bit, and let's go over to the tropical depression that is in the now I guess we'd call it the Central Caribbean, and you've got the wide shot here. It's a little hard to see, so I'm going to go back and get the floater for this because we've got some developments going on. I think that are important from what I'm looking at. It looks to me like the depression is becoming better organized, and the reason why I say that is if you look at this loop all day long, and once it gets all the frames in and gets going, you'll see that the low-level center, the low-level circulation center, had very few clouds with it and was completely exposed. And as we talked yesterday about this, about Fiona, uh, hurricanes leave a trough behind them. And to the south of Fiona, the trough extended down into the northeast Caribbean. So as a result, you wound up with northerly and northeasterly shear that was ripping the thunderstorms east of the center and forcing the thunderstorm activity mostly to the west. When you have westerly shear, it's the other way around. Everything is to the east and there's nothing to the west. Now, watch the loop. Before it goes to the IR, you can see clearly what's happened, Joe. The low-level center gets underneath now. The shear is diminishing pretty rapidly, and the low-level center gets completely underneath the bursting thunderstorms that are showing up in that big, bright white area of clouds busting out there. So my suspicion is that this could become a tropical storm either overnight. There's an Air Force reconnaissance aircraft there now. If it doesn't become a tropical storm tonight, it certainly will become a tropical storm tomorrow. And since we've already, it's kind of funny because everybody initially was looking at, oh, that's Gaston, and then what happens? They get a tropical storm named in the Central Atlantic that is now sitting over the Azores, and then they said, okay, well, this is going to be Hermine. No, because tonight they made the system off the African coast that they've been watching for the last couple of days a tropical storm. And that's unusual because it's moving northward from there, and not usually they're moving westward. This one's moving north and won't even touch the Cabo Verde Islands. It's just going to go toward the Canary Islands. So now we're up to the ice storm all of a sudden. And that means that this will be Ian, I believe. Although I knew somebody that, I don't know if you remember from the News 12 Days, Joe, Ian Rubin. It was spelled, his name was spelled I-A-N, but he pronounced it Ian, I-A-N. But I'm thinking that it's Ian. And that's where we're at. So here we are in September. So we've had the D, E, F, G, H, I. Okay, so now the sixth tropical storm, named storm of this month. So now I'm thinking, hey, you know what? It's not really, that gives us a season total of 9. It's not at all out of the question that we're going to get at least up to the normal of 14. We still have the rest of this month and all of October and the first and then November, but October mostly. We certainly have all of October to catch up and pass the normal of 14.
Well, we were discussing, how, and isn't it amazing? It is so. I mean, my goodness, July, August, dead. Hardly anything to talk about. And I know a lot of people were saying, well, gee, that may mean we may be off the hook. We may not see much of anything this upcoming, hurricane season. It doesn't look like there's going to be a whole lot to be worried about. And look at this. As soon as we move into September, bam. Look at Puerto Rico. Look at Bermuda. Look tonight at the maritime provinces of Canada. And now, after Fiona, all attention will turn to the Gulf of Mexico and the Gulf coastal states, and maybe, Joe, even the Atlantic seaboard for the middle and latter part of next week. All of a sudden, the tropical storm or tropical cyclone season has become very active.
Well, here's what the Hurricane Center did with this. and we have tropical storm watches up for for Jamaica. And I think the primary threat for Jamaica is going to wind up being heavy rain. It's going to be, I'm a, excuse me, I'm assuming that it will become, as it becomes more organized, we're going to see the eastern side of the storm become the dominant side, and they're going to be right in the path of the heavy rain. So that is going to be Jamaica's main, I think, bigger problem. But we do have hurricane watches up now also for the Cayman Islands in the Northwest Caribbean. And you see from the Hurricane Center's track, it's to take it south of Jamaica, over the westernmost Cayman Islands, and then from there, northwestward over western Cuba, and then out into the southeastern Gulf of Mexico, and by Tuesday afternoon, west of Key West, and they strengthened it to a major hurricane, making landfall somewhere, I would say, between Fort Myers and Tampa. I have no issue with this particular forecast up until this point, because I think this is where it makes sense, given what we're looking at and what's going on in the upper air. But after that, it really becomes a very, very dicey proposition in a whole host of ways, and we're going to, of course, speculate on this. But I think this has, the idea that this could become a major hurricane, I think is real. However, there are a couple of caveats. One is the fact that it will travel over western Cuba, so that might do something to it in terms of organization and strength to an extent. It's not a large distance, so the center wouldn't be over land for, probably over land for only a handful of hours. And then what happens in the Gulf of Mexico is going to hinge on dry air that's going to be not that far away, and we're going to talk about that as we move along. I don't know what your thoughts are here, but I think this forecast that they came up with makes sense at this time.
Well, beyond the forecast that you see now on the screen from the Hurricane Center, looking at the projected paths from both the GFS, the 12Z run of the GFS, and also the 12Z run of the European, it seems that this has a potential of moving across central and maybe northeastern Florida. And maybe by Friday of next week, it may get its feet wet again just off the Georgia coast. But then, Joe, both models, and again, this is likely to change or could very well change, but right now, both models are intimating that the storm track beyond next Friday could very well be to our west, that it could go inland to our west across South Carolina, western North Carolina, western Virginia, and by the time we get and also rapid movement. Saturday morning the storm could be over South Carolina. Sunday morning, and I'm talking about, when I say Sunday morning, I'm talking about October the 2nd. By then the storm could be, and interestingly, in as much as they kind of diverge briefly on the track of this system down over the southeastern states, when we get to October 2nd, both the GFS and the European have a pretty close positioning up over central New York State, like near Elmira or Binghamton, that area. That's where the storm presumably could be if you take a consensus between the European and the GFS for Sunday morning, October the 2nd. But again, we're talking now about, 8 or 9 days out? Lots and lots of stuff can happen between now and then. So we shall see what we shall see on this.
I think you said it closer to the beginning. It's going to change. It is going to change, and there are a number of reasons why. So let's go through what's going on. Of course, when you look at these things, you got to look at the upper air to see what's happening, and I've got a close-up here of the east. So starting with yesterday, I went back to yesterday evening. You see Fiona there between South Carolina and Bermuda. You see the upper trough that moved through moved through the northeastern mid-Atlantic states and brought in this beautiful autumn weather. And then you see this upper high that's sitting over Texas. Now, as we go forward, this first trough pulls out on Saturday, And we then get right on its heels. I mean, literally right behind it is another upper low and trough that develops in the over Lake Superior, and it's going to strengthen over the weekend and into next week. You see how it gets stronger there, the darker blue showing up. The jet stream lowers itself all the way down so that you have upper air winds going, the westerlies go all the way into North Florida. And at this point, what by that because that is happening, the to the south of there, we still can't see the storm yet on this screen. There's an upper high in the Atlantic that's strong at the moment, and it's connected with the upper high that's back over in Texas and in the southwest. So that's causing it to move west northwestward. But when we get to early next week with this next really strong trough that's dropping into the Great Lakes and into the eastern United States, that creates a big weakness. And what happens in the week because of the weakness, the storm exploits that weakness and cuts between the upper high. There's one here, the one to the southwest, the one that's out in the Atlantic, and right in the middle here is the weakness because it's responding to that very, very deep upper trough that is still moving through the northeast and mid-Atlantic states, which, by the way, means that at least from the standpoint of the weather for the folks who are underneath all of that, it's going to be cool. It's going to be as cool as what we've experienced, and I think in many places it may wind up being even cooler than what we've just experienced as another big high builds into the northeast. Now, Joe. Here's how I see it. The GFS loves to rush these troughs out. Okay, always too fast, and the European does the same to an extent. I think that might be incorrect. And as a result of this moving out, the storm goes up northward off the west coast of Florida and goes into the Florida Panhandle. You notice how as it gets closer to the Florida Panhandle, it actually starts to weaken, and there's a very good reason for this. That upper trough, I'm going to bring up the 2-meter dew points. That upper trough, take a look at the dew points, Joe, down in Georgia, in North Florida, down in the Florida Panhandle, next Tuesday night. They're in the 30s, okay? So if this storm were to follow the GFS's idea by going into the Florida Panhandle, some of that dry air is going to get entrained into the circulation of this hurricane, and it's going to wind up, you know, probably weakening a bit as it moves. Now that's good news if it does go up to the Florida Panhandle. That because of that dry air that's going to be over the southeast and over the Gulf states, that might mitigate the storm to an extent as it's moving in.
Even if it takes a more easterly track, Joe, across, let's say, Central Florida and up into the Carolinas, it eventually is going to draw in some of that drier air into the circulation, and that's probably why, if you look at the projected strength of the systems, both on the European and also on the GFS, it significantly, and I do mean significantly, weakens some by the time it goes inland. I mean, we're talking about maybe over the water, a 945 or a 950 millibar low. As soon as it goes over the land, frictional drag, of course, will cause the tropical moisture to be wrung out, and so somebody's going to get hit with a lot of rain. But it weakens very rapidly. By the time we get to like the middle of next week, what's left of the system is like a 1004 or 1002 millibar storm system, and that's not overly strong, but you're absolutely right. The interaction with that dry air certainly will have a very, very significant effect on the storm as it begins to move northward during next week.
If it goes into the Panhandle. Because if it goes into southwest Florida, it never gets into that dry air. So in this particular instance, if it goes into South Florida, you could wind up before landfall seeing this get up to a major hurricane because that super dry air that's up in the Panhandle and points north doesn't get drawn down there. So I'm just illustrating the fact that if the hurricane goes in South Florida or the Florida West Coast, say south of Tampa, it's going to come in probably as, it may come in as a Cat 3. If it goes up toward the panhandle and gets to that dry air, it's going to come up, it's going to have a problem. And I got the European here, which shows a huge pressure difference between what this pressure is at landfall, which is somewhere around 949, as opposed to the GFS, which had it weakening almost to a 990 pressure when it went into the panhandle. I mean, that's a forecast issue when we get to next week. The European, it tracks it across Florida onto the Atlantic side, makes a second landfall at Myrtle Beach, a 976, and then it goes, it becomes, after that you get the remnant low that goes up into western PA. We do get some rain out of this if either model is correct. We would get some rain out of this. I'm not convinced that it's going to go. I am not at all convinced that it's going to do that. I think either model solution, is it possible? Are they possible solutions? Sure. But I think there's too much. I honestly believe that there's too much uncertainty in how this trough next week behaves in the eastern part of the United States to, at this point, say anything definitive about where this is going beyond. I feel confident that Southwest Florida is probably the place that's the highest risk, but after that, as far as what happens beyond that, going into the East Coast, or does it go up the east side of the Appalachians or the west side of the Appalachians? Right now, I don't have a clue.
You and about 300 other operational forecasters across the Atlantic seaboard right now who are at weather service offices or private weather service offices. Hey, again, we're trying to do some speculation. I will say this, Joe. I mean, even before, 2 days ago, I was seeing, some TV stations already beginning to speculate on what this particular system down in the Caribbean would do relative to our weather for next week. And, again, Fiona wasn't even past Bermuda at that time, and already they're looking ahead. But like I said, so many times, and I think you'll agree, being in the media, when it bleeds, it leads. And I'm sure that most of the news directors and executive producers are already, when it was a situation like this, it's like a fly landing on a sugar cube. They're beginning to rub their hands, thinking about all of the news packages and whatever that they could do, weather-related packages for the middle and latter part of next week to try to drive up the ratings for their respective stations.
So we have the 8 o'clock advisory for Fiona, 42.3 north, 60.7 west. Top winds they're carrying 125 miles an hour. Interestingly, the lowest pressure, on the I forgot what it was on the 5 o'clock advisory. Let's see if I still have the map up. No, they don't put the pressure on the map. I believe they were carrying 940. I believe it's down to 935. Were they carrying 940 or 937? Either way, it looks like it's dropped a couple of millibars down to 935, 27.61 inches. So at least from the standpoint of the lowest pressure, there certainly hasn't been much weakening.
And another thing to point out about the potential Caribbean system, if indeed it does, based upon the consensus that I drew up for next Friday, if indeed the system is somewhere along the Georgia, South Carolina coast, keep in mind that at the same time that that's happening, there's going to be a very large and expansive high pressure system that's going to be centered probably just north of Toronto and covering much of the northeastern, mid-Atlantic, down into the Midwestern states. And so if we have a system coming up from the south, what probably is going to happen is that regardless of whether it weakens, there's going to be a very sharp and strong pressure gradient that's going to develop somewhere in the mid-Atlantic, probably either next Friday night or on Saturday of next week, which once again could cause some adverse conditions. And we have adverse conditions tonight all along the Atlantic seaboard because of Fiona, not because it's hitting directly, but as we've been saying, like a gigantic agitator in the ocean, it is churning up the seas and causing all kinds of rip currents and high swells, and there are a number of advisories for that along the south coast of Long Island and also along the New Jersey shore. So please don't be a fool and try to hang 10 this weekend, because these can be very, very dangerous waters, again, churned up by that Category 3 hurricane.
Let me take a moment here to just welcome everybody to the chat board tonight. Thanks for being here. Welcome to everybody who's watching the Joe and Joe Weather Show from around the country, and also those that are watching from Atlantic Canada, from Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. We hope that everything goes okay with this. Uh, Joe, why don't you? Because Justin Vale mentions, he says that when you mentioned the flight path and how it would change, can you pull that up and then put it on the screen, because he's saying that there's a big empty area over where Fiona is, and just to illustrate it, we could show that.
Well, I'd have to find a flight. Let me go on Travelocity and pick out a flight, let's say from New York to someplace in the United Kingdom, or maybe Paris, and then I'll have to go and find that flight number,
okay,
and then go to Flight Aware. So
you do while you're doing that. I'll set up your screen to make sure that you can share. Then you just let me know when you're ready to go.
Right.
Actually, you can just share. Just let me know when you put it up on the screen. And in the meantime, let me just also say to those of you who are watching the Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight, if you like the Joe and Joe Weather Show, you can do two things for us. You can hit the subscribe button on the YouTube channel, because we're on 5 days a week, and normally we're not on Fridays or Saturdays, but we're on tonight because of Fiona heading into Nova Scotia. So subscribe to my YouTube channel and you won't miss a show. We're on Monday through Thursday at 7:30 Eastern Time, and on Sundays, although this Sunday we're not going to be on Sunday morning. I'm going to try to be on Sunday evening, because I'm going to be on the road Sunday for a while. Normally on Sundays we're at 11 a.m. So there's a chance that we could have a show sometime Sunday evening, but we're going to let you know. And also thanks to David Fuller hitting Super Chat tonight. I read that you threw out your knee. I'm sorry to hear that. So you're going to be out of work for a couple of weeks. Rest up. As someone who's been injured himself this year with my ankle. Thankfully, it was 8 weeks in the boot, which was no fun, but somehow it seemed like it was going to take forever, and those 8 weeks seemed like an eternity, but they actually went by fairly quickly. So get well soon. And if you like the Joe and Joe Weather Show and you're watching it on a replay, you can want to hit the tip jar, you can hit the super thanks button. And do it that way, and leave some questions or comments. I always go back on the comments on YouTube after the show is done to see what folks have to say and answer any questions that may have come up. So while Joe is flight searching, let's might as well take a look at all these other tropical systems that are running around today. We've got 3 named storms, and by tomorrow morning we may actually have 4 named storms on the map. So let's start with that. And none of these other 2 storms, Gaston and Hermine, are not issues here. So we're just showing them because we've got the time tonight, and then we're going to do some more weather here. So this is Tropical Storm Gaston. At 39.1 north, 29.0 west, which is pretty much right on the Azores. And the movement, its top winds are 60 miles an hour. It's moving south at 9 miles an hour. And the Hurricane Center is forecasting it to turn back to the west and head back toward 45 degrees west as a weakening cyclone and eventually make it post-tropical. They actually have it post-tropical by Sunday morning. And as far as Hermine is concerned, I liked what the Hurricane Center said on their headline. The 8th tropical storm of the season forms, but in the eastern Atlantic, because everybody was thinking that it would be the one in the Caribbean. But this is Tropical Storm Hermine at 18.6 north, 20.5 west. So it's about, I'd say about 200 miles off the African coast and about maybe 150 or 170 miles to the northwest of the easternmost Cabo Verde Islands, moving to the northwest at 10, and you'll notice that they have it as a tropical storm through Saturday afternoon, and then they weaken it to a tropical depression. But they did actually put up, I believe, did they? I thought I saw that they put up tropical storm watches up for the Canary Islands. Let me read the advisory. The advisory on this one, I take it back. There's no coastal watches or warnings in effect. I thought for sure, I thought I saw a headline saying that they did, but I guess I must have. Oh, heavy rains forecast for the Canary Islands. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm absorbing so much information today and looking at so many maps and so many models. After a while, they all blend in and they look the same. So it's so hard to stay one step ahead of all of this. So uh, that pretty much, I think, we're going to come back to Fiona certainly before the show is over, and let me go to uh, one of the other satellite loops. We're going to switch over to. Well, I might as well show you. Let's take a look at Gaston really quick, and wait for this to load. A
I
lot
don't
of
know why, John. I'm waiting. I'm waiting for. I'm having trouble here loading on Travelocity. I don't know. Everybody seems to be maybe weather conscious and also travel conscious tonight.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And now I can't even seem to load the floater images. I'm on the GOES website. I'm going to switch over and try to get the Eastern Continental U.S. There we go. And let's get that loop up here so we can take a look, because we'll be able to see Fiona on the upper right. But I suppose everybody must be going into these websites at this. You need to get off these websites, folks. Oh, the Joe and Joe Weather Show is on. Okay, you're clogging up traffic here. It's not working for me that I'm having to deal with this. Yeah, now I'm trying to load up to the GOES, and the circle of death at the GOES website just going round and round and round and round. All right. While that keeps going round and round, why don't we move along? I had the radar up and then I took it down. All right, this was the Halifax radar that I pulled up earlier, where you can't really see the geography. This is on Rain Viewer. And there you go. Let's see if we can in a bit. Nope.
You know what the problem is? I think a lot of these flights that are heading to Europe, London and Paris, have already taken off.
Yeah. So maybe they're on their way.
And so I just don't have if I had the flight number, and that's what I'm looking for, the flight number of some flight that's going across the big pond, and I just don't have that. So I go on FlightAware, but unfortunately they say, what flight are you looking for? Let me see if I could do something right now.
All right.
On FlightAware and see if I can find something.
Meanwhile, the radars, you can see the western edge of Fiona, just the echoes are touching the border of Maine and New Brunswick. Otherwise, the radars are fairly quiet in the northeast and all the way down the eastern seaboard into northern Florida. We've got a few showers in central Florida and a couple of thunderstorms running around. There's some heavier downpours at the moment moving through Illinois and Indiana. And extending back up into Minnesota. That is part of the next frontal system that is going to be coming through here in the Northeast come Sunday night and Monday morning. In the Southwest, we have a bunch of flash flood warnings and severe thunderstorm warnings up in Arizona, with some heavy rains and heavy downpours going on there. And also into parts of New Mexico and even into a small area there in southeastern California. The Pacific Northwest not doing a whole lot. There's some light shower activity coming in to the Pacific Northwest. The WPC 7-day rainfall forecast, and this is kind of interesting, at least for Florida. The brownish area is 7 to 10 inches, and those patches of yellow that you see are 10 to 15, 10 to 15 inches of rain over the next 7 days. So obviously the bulk of that is going to be from the tropical system. And if this is going to go up, well, it's not in the time frame for the west side of the Appalachians all the way up. So when you're looking at rainfall amounts up in the northeast and northern mid-Atlantic states, that's more with the cold front that's going to be coming through Sunday night into Monday. And we're seeing about a quarter of an inch, a few little pockets of half an inch in southern New Jersey down into Delaware, and also it just touching southeastern New England. Heavier amounts in and around Lake Ontario and Lake Erie because there's going to be some lake effect going on next week. There was some actually today and last night, and we saw that when Bill Goodman was on. And there's going to be some lake effect rain shower activity up in that area. Although, see, are we going to see? I got to go to the GFS for this because the European doesn't have the rain and frozen. Do we have any light blue? Are we going to have any light blue? No, no light blue for you snow lovers. No light blue. It's all green. And you see the front that's coming through. Did you go for Sunday? Because tomorrow's going to be the better of the 2 weekend days, and we'll be back up in the upper 60s and low 70s. But did you go for any showers late Sunday?
Yes, I did go for a chance of showers later on Sunday. Thickening, any early sun giving way to thickening, lowering clouds, and a chance by later in the day of a few scattered showers. So, yeah.
And then after that front goes by, you notice that big high over South Dakota, just a beautiful, lot of another shot of dry air that's going to try to get in here. But with that deep upper trough, there's likely to be a lot of instability in upstate New York and in northwestern PA, southwestern New York. In fact, there's a little wave that develops on that front on Tuesday that the GFS runs up with some rain getting into southeastern New England. I didn't really notice that until just now. There's probably another arm of that upper trough swinging through, and then the coolest of the air comes in on Wednesday with that 546 thickness gets very close, Joe. On Wednesday and Thursday, you got the high sitting in Wisconsin. This is a nice cool shot of air that's coming down with that big high, and then of course after that, it's who knows with this next one coming out of the Caribbean where it's going to wind up. So, any luck with the flights?
Yes. In fact, I have Virgin Atlantic Flight 4 heading for London. And it's a very interesting, Joe. The view that I was able to get on FlightAware shows you clearly. Not only do they show you the flight path, but they also show you the radar, and you can clearly see.
That's the best radar shot. That winds up being the best radar shot that I was looking through a whole bunch of them. That's perfect.
So there you go. The flight left from JFK. And normally what they do in flights like this to Europe is they take a track, let's say, to Boston and out across down East Maine and across Nova Scotia and on up to Newfoundland. But notice, if you will, that tonight with the storm, with Fiona here, the track is more to the northeast or north-northeast, taking a path up across inland areas of Maine into New Brunswick, past the Gaspé Peninsula of Quebec, over the St. Lawrence, and well to the north of Newfoundland. So they're taking a more northerly track than what they normally would do in order to avoid the situation regarding Fiona tonight. So that's very interesting how they've done that. But that's not unexpected. We said that was going to probably be the case. They'd probably have to vector around the path of the storm, and they're certainly staying clear of the storm here, going well to its north and taking a more northerly track. But that's what they had to do tonight in order to avoid any of the significant effects of Fiona.
By the way, on that radar, you can see the gap in the echoes in between that the lead bands that have moved in, and then the core. The core stands out separately from on that radar display, and that's the part that when that gets in is going to be the big deal as far as wind is concerned, and the heavy rains that are going to be going on the west side.
Yeah, you can see that Nova Scotia in this particular shot is more or less eclipsed by all of the areas of rain. But yeah, you can see it right around here, and somewhere up here is where Cape Breton Island is, and of course here's Newfoundland over here. And again, the storm track or the storm system, the center of the storm, probably right down here. And you can just imagine everything swirling around in that direction. So again, that's why that we have flights from New York, from JFK, taking a path far more to the north than they normally would on a track heading for Europe, at least for tonight.
I got the hazard map back on to check some of the latest obs. I noticed that there is a buoy, Joe, out there. Probably not, unless that's Sable Island. Maybe that's Sable Island. Hang on, I'm just waiting for it's refreshing. Let's see. Yes, Sable Island right now is 68 degrees with a dew point of 66. Okay.
Oh, lovely.
68, 66. East northeast at 54, gusting to, I'm sorry, east northeast at 43, gusting to 54. Now, Sable Island is at 43.9, just about 44 and 60. So they're going to be, and what did we say that the advisory was? What? I forget. The 8 o'clock advisory, or so it's 39.6 at 5 o'clock and 61. 42.3 and 60.7. So they're on the they're in the core right now. I mean, there should be some interesting obs coming out of Sable Island there in right now and in the next couple of hours, because they're just about getting into the core of this if they're not in it already. And seeing some wind gusts now up in Eastern Nova Scotia. We've got Hart Island reporting 39, gusting to 51. That's the otherwise everybody else is gusting in the 30s. We have a few places to the south, Bevan Island or Bevan Island. Correct. I apologize ahead of time if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Okay, I'm just letting you know. I'm sorry. 43 gusting to 52, because some people get really ticked off about that stuff, and I sort of understand it when your name is Chaffee and there's no H in it and it ends in an I, and people try to put all sorts of letters and spell it all sorts of weird ways. So I get it, and that's why I'm extra sensitive when it comes to that sort of stuff. They were gusting to 52 at Bevan Island or Baven Island. The buoy that's sitting near Halifax is 42 mile an hour wind gust. Although inland at Halifax, it's at the Bedford Basin is only north-northwest at 14, actually gusting to 28. And further down along the coast, most of the winds are gusting between 25 and 30 miles an hour. Let's just take a look at Newfoundland. I know they're still too far away, but just for laughs, see if I can get some obs from Newfoundland. And
we have somebody on the chat board. We have somebody on the chat board, Joe. Me and my pigeon, and he says there are over 30 cranes in the city of Halifax right now. Dorian knocked one to the ground when it came through. Hope they remain safe this time. I would assume that if you're a construction company and you're aware that a hurricane is heading in your direction, that there is a way to either lower the cranes, or if at least not lower them, to at least set them in place so that they can somehow manage to stay up during those very strong sustained winds of like 100, 150 kilometers per hour. So we'll see where that goes. 30 cranes in Halifax. I mean, Halifax is not the biggest of cities. I guess they're one of the fastest growing cities to have 30 cranes up at a single time there. So
gorgeous up in Halifax.
Yep.
Absolutely gorgeous. If anybody is in New Brunswick, I know I saw Tim on the board earlier. I'd just be curious because this interesting side note, we mentioned this yesterday, was the fact that much of the Northeast gets its diesel fuel from a refinery that's up in New Brunswick. Now, if it's in the south part of New Brunswick, closer to where Maine is, it probably won't have any issues. If it's up in northeastern part of New Brunswick, where it's in that area that's under a hurricane warning, then well, we hope the refinery doesn't go down, because that means that the diesel fuel can't get into the northeast, or that at least whatever comes from there gets cut off from the supply, and that could cause some, maybe cause some shortages or drive up prices. But just if someone has an idea of that lives up there, that's watching, wants to put it up on the chat board to let us know where it is, it would be most appreciated. We had another super chat hit besides David Fuller, but I can't see it. I don't know if you can see it.
David Fuller and Steve Lapointe, who says in his super chat message, all you folks hit the thumbs up under video, Joe and Joe. Thank you. And we're up to 93 so far on the likes. And going further back, Joe, that's as far as I can see. It was either we had Steve and we also had David Fuller.
Okay, so if you could take us up over 100 likes, folks, Joe and I love to break that 100 mark. So that would be that would be great. You would make us feel very, very good. All right, so Dub says, remember our transmission lines come from Cape Breton as well. So if they go down, all of the power for the mainland goes down as well. And New Brunswick, Canada guy says, I'm close to the main border. Welcome to the show, by the way. I'm close to the main border and only supposed to get gusty winds here and no rain. Correct. Correct. Very, very little rain. You're right on the edge of the echoes, and at worst case scenario is you wind up with some light rain where you are. It's everybody else in the other direction. So Jeeper, welcome to the chat board tonight. Says South New Brunswick here, close to the refinery in St. John. Okay, so when you say South New Brunswick, where are you with respect to? Are you closer to the main border, or are you closer are you to the east or to the northeast and closer to what is that, Cape Breton, Joe?
Yeah, I think so. Anthony Orr, thank you for hitting the super chat tonight.
Yeah, Earl,
and Joe, we're up to 116 likes.
Okay, we're happy. Okay, we're very happy. And Jeeper says the refinery should be okay. All right, good to hear. Good to hear. All right, so let's do LMLG Quick Scooper from Canada. Because I know he's from Canada. Why, Joe? Because he gave us $2.79 Canadian. and with the current exchange rates, so I'm sorry to reveal the amount. I should have just said that you gave it to us in Canadian. Thank you for hitting the tip jar. Whatever the amount, whatever it is, it's a very nice gesture and definitely most appreciated. And yes, here we're safe because there's not much going on, other than the fact that you want to guess how low my temperature was this morning?
Hi, my low this morning was 47. I will say your low this morning, you're always like 5 or 6 degrees ahead of me, so I'll say 41.
Very, very, very good, very close. 42. 42 here this morning. I was out on the deck after the show last night, and the cold front came through, and all of a sudden the wind shifted around, and we had a nice gusty breeze at about 25 miles an hour for about 5 or 10 minutes. But you can feel all that dry air just came in, and this morning I woke up 42 degrees. It was beautiful. It felt great. Although I went out this morning to the dog park, I should have put long pants on. Instead, I went out with shorts, but I did go out with my New York Giants sweatshirt. So I'm wearing it proudly now that they're 2-0. Correct.
Wow.
And maybe Sunday they'll go 3-0. So let's do a little bit of what usually is Briller Jeopardy, but Scott Briller, who we lovingly refer to as the chairman, is enjoying some time off, and hope he is well. I hope your mom is doing well, Scott, if you're watching the show. Big hellos to her. And Johnny Quest, who's one of our regulars, and he volunteered to substitute So, and he's been given some really tough questions. So, but this is for everybody to participate on the chat board. So, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Well, I just remembered. I'm still having. I got to get my phone because Messenger works on my phone, but it doesn't work on my desktop. Because Facebook's been having all sorts of issues.
Thank you, Dub Dub from Canada. Thanks for coming out tonight and covering the storm for us. Very informative as usual. And we knew that you folks up in Canada, a lot of you watch Joe and Joe. We even got a compliment from our new friend. By the way, Joe, I in talking with Mike Decoste from 101.5 The Hawk in Nova Scotia, he says that we're free to call or talk to him maybe early next week in the aftermath of the storm. Give us a rundown of what it's like up in his area in the aftermath of whatever Fiona throws at them tonight and early tomorrow morning. So we'll certainly do that. It certainly is nice to have friends up north of the border.
Yes, we love it when we sometimes get people from the UK that watch, and we've even had folks from Australia come up every once in a while. They're coming out of their winter and going to spring. So yeah, we love the international feel because sometimes we do talk about weather in other parts of the world, and not always when it's adverse. Although although it helps to be adverse. And all right, so you ready to go? Here we go. Uh, the top 5 hurricanes, Joe, the top 5 that produced the most tornadoes. The most tornadoes.
Well, I'll say Camille as one of the top 5.
Camille did not make the list. But while you're thinking about who might have made the list, I want to say thanks to Leon Probitsky for hitting super chat. Thank you so much, Leon. And ICMP says hello from the Netherlands. I think you're the first person ICMP to watch us from the beautiful Netherlands. It's on my list of places to go if I ever retire from doing the Joe and Joe Weather Show. So Camille is not on the list.
That's very unusual. I would have thought that would have been one of the storms.
Christina Pedia and Alfred K. Phillips. Christina Pedia says Michael or Matthew, and Alfred K. Phillips, our buddy from Wainwright, Alaska, on the North Slope there. Wilma, no, Wilma is not on the list.
How about Allen, 1980?
No, I think I'm going to throw some hints. Okay, Katrina's not on the list. Okay, so you may have heard me describe this one, Joe, as a buzzsaw.
Oh, well, that would be Andrew.
That is correct, and Andrew comes in at number 5. Within 5, how many tornadoes did it produce?
Andrew?
Yeah, within 5. First number that comes to the top of your head.
I don't know, 16.
Nope, 61.
61.
Right, you needed to flip the 1 and the 6. Michael DeCara gets the number 1. He gets the number 1 tornado producer. And you ought to know that this one is obvious because when we worked together over at FiOS, I used to call his name out many times.
Our wonderful director,
Ivan.
The Ragoose.
Ivan, I'm ready to record now, Ivan. Where's my director? Where's my director? I can't possibly do this before 10 in the morning. I must be done before 4:30 at night. Ivan is number 1 in 2004. Within 5, how many? Within 10, how many tornadoes, Joe?
Well, if you said 61, and six, the other one was what? Number 5?
Yes.
Well, that has to be more than 61.
Clearly.
How about let's double and say 122.
Well, you know what, Joe? The logic of doubling that amount was actually quite smart. 120
Wow.
from Ivan. So you've got the top and the bottom, so you know everybody else falls in between. Okay. The other three are going to be hard to get. Number two, number two, number two, um, was a Texas hurricane. God, you're not going to get this. Nobody's going to get
Harvey?
this. No, it wasn't Harvey. This goes back a bit. Um, let's see. I'm trying to formulate a hint for you.
Betsy?
No.
Hmm.
This actress, the first name of this actress, okay, loved playing a certain actor's mother.
Oh, Beulah?
Beulah.
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 You're thinking about Beulah Bondi,
That's
right?
yeah, correct. That
Jimmy
was
Stewart's. Yeah.
and that was in 115 tornadoes in 1967. The remaining two is number 4 and number 3. Number 4, they were in back-to-back years. Number 4 was in 2005. Number 3 was in 2004. Checking the chat board to see if anybody named any of those. Oh, 9 Yard says hello from Slovakia. Very our first person ever from Slovakia. Welcome, welcome to the chat board tonight, and welcome to the Joe and Joe Weather Show.
Slovakia now.
Yes.
Not Czechoslovakia. But Czechoslovakia doesn't.
No,
it's the Czech Republic now.
It's the Czech Republic and Slovakia. They split in two.
Right.
So John Sachs says Bob, no. Michael McGuire says Irene, no. I'm going to try to pronounce this. Abdelaziz Hamdi says Bob, no, not. I hope I said it right. If not, I apologize ahead of time. We already got Ivan on there. Isaias from a couple of years ago, no, that's not on the list. Oh, Anthony Orr, our resident hurricane statistician, Anthony Orr, and also the occasional super chat hitter, which he did tonight, gets it right. Number 4 is Rita in 2005. So that leaves one for 2004. Rita produced 89, and the next one in 2004 produced 103. Okay, so let's see if anybody gets it without Googling. Charlie, no. Leon, Johnny Sachs, Isabel, no. Alex, Michael McGuire, no. Oh, Louis Orizio. Louis Orizio, Joe gets it. Hurricane Francis in 2004. Let me ask you a question. If I had given you the hint that there was a famous jackass by this name, would you have gotten it?
Francis the Talking Donkey?
Yes. Would you have gotten it off that clue?
No.
No, I didn't think so. I would have had to elaborate a bit. Oh, good Lord. Carolyn, also from Canada, hitting Super Chat tonight. Carolyn, thank you so much, and welcome to the Joe and Joe Weather Show. We're glad to see you here, and if you are living in an area that's under a hurricane warning, please be safe. And hopefully we'll get through all this. And Tesla Grow Green says, I live in Truro, Nova Scotia, and we still have power. All right. Well,
you still have power now, but wait a little while. If you have let me assure you, if you had my power company, you probably wouldn't have power. I once had before it's even arrived, Joe, my power went off. So. We can laugh at it now.
I
right?
know. Yeah, exactly. And I actually, I've lost power. I've lost power a few times here, but it usually comes back fairly quickly. I have to say that because a thunderstorm here, even a 20, 30 mile an hour wind gust could blow out a power line. Because some of these, the infrastructure with telephone poles and so on hasn't been touched since they first probably put them up in the 19 teens or whenever they did. There are places where you see wires hanging, almost to ground level, but they're actually pretty good about getting stuff fixed within a couple of hours. So I can't really complain.
And here's the best on the chat board tonight. Best compliment from Jeeper. And he said, I'd rather watch Joe and Joe than look at Environment Canada. So,
Thank
there
you.
You go.
Thank you so much for the kind words. Not that I got in trouble, but someone took offense once a couple of years ago when I criticized about the Canadian model, and they wrote me a comment saying, hey, how dare you criticize our weather model? It's like, oh God, now the world has gotten to the point where everybody's so touchy, even about their weather models, Joe. They're touchy.
It's kind of like, when you talk about, I don't know, whatever, baseball, who's got when back in the 50s, the Dodgers, the Yankees, and the New York Giants, who was the better center fielder? Was it Willie Mays, Duke Snider, or Joe DiMaggio? I mean, you got to figure, everybody has a bit of pride in whatever that they're talking about or looking about. So,
well, I will just
Did we look at the Canadian model tonight as to how it's handling that just in next week? Or
no, we didn't, but we can.
Now let's quickly do that.
Okay.
We've only been on for an hour and 20 minutes. What's another minute or two, right?
What weather show goes an hour and 20 minutes with limited, if any, commercial interruption?
Yes.
All right, so this is the Canadian model, which actually was up until it was like the GFS and taking it northward toward the coast, toward the Panhandle, and then tries to go up the west side of the Appalachians, but then takes a very sharp right turn into North Carolina, and then moves off the North Carolina coast, and then just starts to run out east-northeast. Rain gets as far north as the northern edge gets to about New York City, western Long Island, to about between Scranton and Allentown, and then it just goes out and dries up. So look, I'll tell you this, even that solution is not unreasonable given what's going on in the upper air that's going to be going on in the upper air in the Northeast. And in this case of the Canadian, from what we were talking about earlier, I mean, it pulls the whole trough out, and you're just sort of left with this westerly flow, and the feature that represents the tropical storm gets as far north as it can before the northwest flow begins to shove it out to the east and taking it out east-northeast. So that's not unreasonable. I don't think any solution beyond whatever happens to Florida is an unreasonable one. I think there's too much going on in the northern stream, far out into the long range, which means that we have still a ton of possibilities when it comes to what, if any, impact it's going to have beyond those obvious areas that I mentioned.
And HM, thank you so much for taking time to help analyze this dangerous storm and help keep people safe. Your expertise is greatly appreciated. And this is from Hal from Kildare Capes PEI, Prince Edward Island. Yeah, we've mentioned Nova Scotia, we've mentioned Newfoundland, we've mentioned New Brunswick, but we haven't mentioned Prince Edward Island, which is right there where Nova Scotia is. So thank you so much, Hal, and we'll be watching. And as I said, with our friend from Port Hawkesbury, we'll be praying as well for everybody's safety tonight and over the weekend in the path of the storm.
And tell your friends. If they're not happy with what they see on Environmental Canada, just give them the YouTube link because the show will be on my YouTube channel library, and they can watch it on the replay. So that's a big plus.
And Dub says 14,000, I presume, people out of power right now. 14,000 and 4 hours away. Halifax is the city of trees. Sydney has also lost some old trees in the downtown core. Power will be cut here for a bit of time. Again, when we were speaking with our friend from Port Hawkesbury a little while ago, he said that with Hurricane Juan And with Dorian, they were sometimes in some places out of power for over 5 days. So batten down, because I have a feeling that we're going to be in that category with Fiona during the next few hours.
You are absolutely correct on that. All right, so I think let's wrap up the show, and the Joe and Joe Weather Show brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, on Long Island in Southwest Suffolk County, serving the entire New York, New Jersey tri-state area. If we do see a tropical storm or hurricane come up and impact the northern mid-Atlantic states or the Northeast, if you're in the New York City, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut tri-state area, you need a generator, you need a new pump, you need to get flashlights, batteries, or anything else with regards to making your home look, making sure that you're protected to get through the storm. Give Omni a call. 631-756-1125 is the telephone number, and the website is
OmniTrueValue.com, Joe. So when do you think we'll be doing an evening show on Sunday? Or?
Okay, so the next chance, it'll depend on how I do, because I'm gonna be in Florida next week. I'm gonna be on the east coast of Florida in the southeast. So I will not be on the west coast. But if I were going to the west coast right now, I would probably reschedule my trip. But I'm going to the east coast because I have to. And anyway, so if I make good time on Sunday, the way I'm timing it out, Joe, I should get to my destination probably around 6 o'clock. So if I do that, just give me an hour or two to just sort of stretch, and maybe we could try something around 8 o'clock, but no guarantees from the management here.
Okay, we'll see.
All right, so
we're on standby.
All right, so if we're going to have a show, it'll be Sunday at 8 o'clock. But again, it's dicey at the moment. Everybody, have a great night. Have a great weekend. Our friends in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and in Prince Edward Island and anywhere else in Atlantic Canada, be safe overnight and tomorrow as Fiona goes through. And we'd be very interested after words on the next show if you could take the time and let us know how you managed, how you got through it, or what's going on. It would be wonderful. So hopefully we'll see you on the next Joe and Joe Weather Show. Thanks to everybody for the super chat hits, for the, how many likes did we get tonight? 135. Thank you for the 135 likes. And we will hopefully see you on Sunday. Good night, everybody.
Stay safe.